There are things in a life that don't announce themselves as important. A sound that shouldn't be there. A weight that feels wrong in your hands. A detail so small that your rational mind wants to explain it away, wants to tell you you're imagining things, that you're being dramatic, that you should just zip the bag back up and finish packing. But your hands know before your mind does. Your hands always know first. I found the envelope on the night of October 14th, while I was packing for our flight to Cancun. Brandon and I had been married for 8 years. He was 44, the founder and CEO of Hartwell Property Group, a commercial real estate firm he'd built from almost nothing in the years before we met. I was 36. I had a background in financial analysis, a degree I'd worked hard for, and a career I genuinely loved until Brandon, in that easy and certain way he had, told me I didn't need it anymore. "You're married to someone who can take care of you," he said. "Why would you want to spend your days in a cubicle when you don't have to?" Back then, I heard it as love. Looking back now, I hear something else entirely. The trip was supposed to be a 4-day client retreat at a resort on the coast, the kind of event Brandon organized every fall, flying out his top partners and a few key staff to close deals in a room with an ocean view. He'd brought Trevor, his CFO and closest friend of 15 years. I was coming along as the CEO's wife, which meant smiling at dinners, staying out of the way during the actual business, and decorating the table setting of Brandon's professional life. I pack the way I've always packed, organized, methodical, every item exactly where I'll be able to find it. Light clothes on one side, dark on the other. Documents in the front pouch. Toiletries in a clear zip bag. Brandon used to joke that I packed like I was preparing for a military deployment. This from a man who would throw things into a suitcase 20 minutes before a car arrived. It was when I pressed down the side compartment of my carry-on to zip it shut that my fingers found something stiff and solid where there should have been nothing. I stopped, pulled it out. A standard business envelope, the kind you'd find in any office supply drawer, but thick. Heavy in a particular way that makes your stomach drop before you've even decided to open it. I stood in the bedroom with the closet light on, and the sound of Brandon's voice carrying from the hallway. He was on the phone, the way he almost always was in the evenings, and I held that envelope for a long moment before I opened it. The cash was banded in neat stacks, used bills, mostly hundreds. I didn't count it then, but the weight told me we were talking about something significant. Beneath the cash was a cell phone I'd never seen, a prepaid burner, the kind you buy at a gas station, and beneath that, folded in thirds, was a single sheet of paper, an account number, a routing number, a name I didn't recognize, and a handwritten note, transfer on arrival, don't use the regular line. I stood there long enough that the feeling in my chest stopped being shock and became something colder and much more focused. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, slid the envelope into the compartment, zipped it up, walked to the bathroom and held both hands under cold water. I wasn't crying. I was past the part where I cry first. Brandon's voice was still traveling from down the hall, low, assured, the cadence of a man in complete control of a room. I stood at the sink and listened and understood something very clearly. He had placed that envelope in my carry-on, my bag, the one attached to my name, my passport, going through Mexican customs tomorrow morning. He wasn't accidentally moving something. He was choosing to move it through me. Because that's what international customs requires. Any traveler entering Mexico carrying more than $10,000 in cash is required by law to declare it. Every country with a major international airport enforces the same rule. Undeclared cash gets confiscated. The person carrying it gets detained for questioning. Brandon knew that. He also knew that I, standing there with my clean record, and my guileless carry-on, and my face that no customs officer would look at twice, was his safest courier. I didn't sleep much that night. Brandon came to bed around midnight, kissed me on the forehead, the way he did when he wanted to appear affectionate without being present, and fell asleep in under 5 minutes. I lay beside him and stared at the ceiling and counted 8 years. 8 years of shaping my schedule around his. 8 years of hosting his clients, editing his speeches, maintaining the house in the kind of order that made him look good without him thinking about it for a single second. 8 years of telling myself this was partnership. That the fact that I had no income of my own, no savings in my own name, no financial independence whatsoever, was fine. Because I got up at 3 a.m. and photographed every item in that envelope. The cash, the burner phone, the handwritten note, the account number and routing number on that piece of paper. Then I put everything back, exactly as it was. Trevor picked us up at 6:15. He was in the front seat of the car, with his silver carry-on, loaded in the trunk, soft-sided, with an exterior zipper pocket he always kept unlocked because he was forever losing his boarding pass. I'd seen him pack that bag a dozen times at company events over the years. The drive to O'Hare was 40 minutes. I kept my voice warm, my face easy. I talked about the resort, about the weather, about whether the client dinner was indoor or outdoor seating. I was very calm. I have always been capable of being very calm when it matters, which is something Brandon never fully understood about me. He thought my calmness meant I wasn't paying attention. He confused stillness with absence. At the airport, Brandon got pulled into a call right outside the security entrance. One of the Texas clients. He waved us forward and said he'd catch up. Trevor picked up his carry-on and headed toward the line. I told him I needed to grab water and would meet him on the other side. It took 30 seconds. Trevor had set his carry-on on the floor while he looked at his phone. Exterior zipper pocket unlocked, exactly as I'd expected. I already had the envelope in my hand. I'd transferred it from my bag to my jacket pocket before we left the house, at 3:30 in the morning while Brandon slept. I unzipped Trevor's pocket, placed the envelope inside, zipped it back up. Walked to the water kiosk, bought a bottle, rejoined the line. My bag went through security without a single issue. Trevor's went through without a flag. Brandon came through 7 minutes later, straightening his jacket, already wearing his public-facing smile. The flight was 3.5 hours. Brandon and Trevor sat together and talked business the entire time. I sat one row behind them, held a book I didn't read, and watched the clouds go past. Cancun International Airport on a Thursday morning is loud and busy and full of light. We landed just before noon. Brandon and I went through customs together, forms filled out on the plane, everything declared, nothing flagged. We moved to the other side of the barrier and waited for Trevor. Trevor didn't come. I watched through the glass as a customs official asked him to step aside. Watched the official's hand gesture toward the carry-on. Watched Trevor's face move through several expressions in the space of a few seconds. Surprise, confusion, and then a very particular kind of panic that has nothing to do with innocence. They brought the bag to the secondary inspection table, opened the exterior zipper pocket, pulled out the envelope. Brandon was standing 15 feet away from me. I watched him see it happen. I watched his face go completely still, not confused, not surprised, just still. The stillness of a person whose carefully controlled situation has just become visible to everyone in the room. He reached for his phone, started walking back and forth. His jaw was tight. The polish was cracking at the edges. Trevor was detained for questioning. After about 40 minutes, Brandon came to me and said there had been a misunderstanding and I should go to the hotel. I said okay. I took my carry-on. I went to the hotel. The resort was the kind of place that exists to make you forget the outside world. White stone, turquoise water, a lobby that smelled like gardenias. I sat on the edge of the bed in our room and called my father. Philip is 71 years old. He spent 30 years as a corporate attorney before he retired, and he is one of the least excitable people I have ever known, which is exactly why I called him, and not anyone else. I told him what I'd found, what I'd done, what was happening to Trevor right now at customs. I kept my voice even. He was quiet for a moment. Then, did you photograph the contents before you moved it? I had, every single item. Send them to me, he said. Don't touch anything else until we talk. I sent the photos. I sat by the window and looked at the ocean, which was exactly the color it's supposed to be, and utterly indifferent to my situation. Philip called back 40 minutes later. The account number on that slip of paper, the routing number, he'd had a colleague pull it. It traced back to a private bank in the Cayman Islands. A holding company, no legitimate business operations, the kind of structure you build when you need money to exist somewhere that isn't where it started. Rachel, Philip said. Call your bank, not the joint account, your personal savings, the account from your grandmother. I had kept a savings account since before my marriage, an inheritance from my grandmother, which I'd never touched, because it was the one thing that had always been entirely mine. I hadn't looked at it in months because looking at it felt like not trusting Brandon, and I had trusted Brandon. I called the bank. The automated balance came back, $32. 11 months ago, That account had held $68,000. I sat on the edge of the bed in a resort room in Cancun, with the ocean visible through the window, and I was aware of my own breathing in a very precise, deliberate way. Brandon had been emptying my account. He was authorized on it. I'd added him years ago, in the trusting early days of the marriage, when I thought that was what married people did. He'd made small, irregular withdrawals over 11 months, spaced carefully enough not to trigger any automatic alerts. The cash in that envelope was mine. My grandmother's money, my inheritance, converted to banded hundreds, and stuffed into a burner envelope, and tucked into my suitcase without my knowledge or consent. He wasn't moving company money offshore for some complex business restructuring. He was moving my money out of the country so that when he eventually filed for divorce, I would have nothing left to fight with. I spent the next hour being very methodical. I called the bank and had Brandon removed from my account. There was almost nothing left, but it mattered. I documented every transaction from the past 11 months and sent the records to Philip. I opened my phone's notes app and wrote down every fact in order: what I'd found, when I'd found it, what the bank said, what Philip told me, what happened at customs. Just facts. No emotion. Philip called again that evening. The Cayman account structure had been flagged by his colleague as a known vehicle for asset concealment. It had appeared in 2 other cases. Combined with the undeclared cash, the burner phone, and the handwritten instruction to avoid standard wire transfer channels, the Customs Tribunal was referring the matter to both Mexican financial authorities and the IRS International Division. These things, Philip said, start slow and then move very fast. And then he told me the name he'd found attached to the holding company. Not Brandon's name. Not Trevor's. A woman named Vanessa, who worked at a real estate consulting firm in Dallas that had done business with Hartwell Property Group for 14 months, which was, not coincidentally, almost exactly how long Philip's colleagues estimated the offshore transfers had been running. I already understood by then, but hearing it confirmed was its own thing. Brandon hadn't just been draining my savings. He'd been building a future somewhere else, with someone else, funded partly by what had always been mine. Brandon came back to the hotel room at 9 that night. He stood near the door and said he needed to explain some things. I was sitting at the desk. I had a glass of water. I wasn't hungry. Okay, I said. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. That was unusual. Brandon almost always positioned himself above difficult conversations. Standing by a window or a wall, sitting at the same level meant he needed something from me. The money, he started. I know what it looks like. What does it look like? I asked. He hesitated, like something it isn't. I talked to Philip, I said. He had a colleague trace the account number on that paper. It goes to a Cayman Islands holding company with no real operations and a structure his firm has flagged in 2 other asset concealment cases. I let that sit for a second. My personal savings account has $32 in it. 11 months ago, it had $68,000. The recalculation in his face was something I'd never seen on him before. Not anger. Not even fear, exactly. More like the expression of a man who is very rapidly reassessing how much the other person knows and discovering that it is significantly more than he had planned for. You talked to Philip before you came to the hotel, he said. I did. Rachel. I also locked you out of every account you were authorized on that has my name attached to it, I said. So, I'm not asking because I need a confession to prove something. I'm asking because I want to know whether you're going to keep explaining while you're sitting in a hotel room in Mexico with nothing left to manage. He looked at me for a long time. I was going to leave, he said quietly. I know. I wasn't trying to hurt you. He said it like he meant it, which was almost the strangest part. But you were going to leave me with nothing. He didn't deny it. How long? I asked. About a year. A year. He had looked at me every morning for a year knowing, kissed me on the forehead every night knowing, sat across from me at dinner and asked how my day was and smiled the particular smile he used. For moments he wanted to appear present. And Vanessa, I said. His jaw tightened slightly. The name landing told me what I needed. About a year, he said again. I nodded. I set the glass down. Okay. I stood up. I'm going to sleep. You should find another room. Rachel. I'm not going to argue tonight, I said. We're in a foreign country and arguing with you isn't going to restore what's missing from my bank account. Find another room. He found another room. I flew home 2 days later, alone. Brandon stayed to deal with the customs situation, which I understood by then would be consuming his attention for considerably longer than a week. At the airport leaving Cancun, I sat at the gate and thought about the moment my fingers had pressed against that envelope in the side compartment of my carry-on. The way my hands had known before my mind caught up. The way a decision had formed in the 30 seconds after, not consciously, just clearly. The way things clarify when the alternative is unacceptable. I thought about the woman who'd let herself be talked out of a career she loved, who'd stopped having money of her own and told herself it didn't matter because the marriage was the point. Who had believed, sincerely for 8 years, that the arrangement she was living in was love. I thought about the woman who had stood at a water kiosk in O'Hare at 6:30 in the morning and transferred an envelope between 2 bags without a tremor in her hands. Both of those women were me. I was figuring out what to do with that. Philip flew to Chicago the following week. We sat at my kitchen table with his colleague Sylvia, a family law attorney he'd worked with for 20 years, and laid everything out in order. The account withdrawals. The offshore structure. The chain of transactions Philip's colleague had traced through 3 intermediary accounts back to Hartwell Property Group operating funds. Brandon had been commingling company money with the personal transfers, which created a liability that extended well beyond our marriage and into federal territory. What does that mean for me? I asked. It means, Sylvia said, that you have considerably more leverage in the divorce than you would otherwise have had. It also means that your cooperation with the investigation is something the federal side will notice and appreciate. I looked at my father. He looked back at me, not telling me what to do, just there. I'm going to cooperate with everything, I said. Philip nodded once. That was all. The divorce took 14 months. Brandon was too occupied managing the federal inquiry to put much energy into contesting assets he'd never expected me to know about. By the time the settlement was finalized, I had the house, the full restored amount from my grandmother's account, plus interest and damages, and enough of a financial footing to do something I hadn't done in 8 years. I went back to work. Not in the same role, not at the same level I'd left. 8 years out of financial analysis is 8 years, and I had to start further back than I'd been when I stopped. The first week was humbling in ways I hadn't anticipated. The second was better. By the third week, I remembered something I'd somehow managed to forget about myself. I was genuinely good at this. I always had been. That hadn't gone anywhere. It had just been waiting. Carmen came over the night I deposited my first paycheck into an account with only my name on it. We ordered too much food, and she made me tell the whole story again from the beginning, and somewhere in the middle of it I laughed. Not at anything particularly funny, just at the strange, improbable shape of how everything had unfolded. Only you, she said, shaking her head. Only you would handle a crisis by opening your notes app. I thought about that list. The timestamps. The photographs taken at 3 in the morning. The calm, steady documentation of facts, while the person who'd set everything in motion slept 6 feet away. Some truths don't announce themselves. They sit quietly in the side compartment of a carry-on bag, waiting for the right hands to find them. And when you do find them, you have a choice. You can pretend you didn't, zip the bag back up, and keep living inside someone else's version of your life. Or you can take 30 seconds at an airport and change the direction of the entire story. I took the 30 seconds. Some of us just need that long.